Okay, so let's take a look at some of these meta characters. The first one in this sequence we will look at is the back-tic. The thing to remember is that this back-tic is not the same as single quotes. It is different. It's a different kind of single quote. It's called a back-tic or the grave accent. It's used in different languages like French. So this back-tic character is not on the right side of your keyboard, it's on the left side of your keyboard, just below the escape character. You should see, just below the escape, on most keyboards you should see a tilde and a back-tic. You get the tilde if you press the shift in the back-tic. Without the shift, you just press the character below, the key below the escape character, or somewhere near there, you should see back-tic, depending on your keyboard. And it is used to do what's called command substitution. So what is it really doing? The thing is, if you had a string like this, you can use the back-tic character to execute a command that is, rather than having this type in pwd, it will execute the pwd command. So it's like starting a subshell. And then what happens is whatever this returns is joined with this string, and then you echo or you print the whole thing. So the nice thing about this is that you can use the back-tic to execute a command, take the output of that command and store it along with some other string, and then you can print it out like you do here, or you can save it and print it out for something else. And this is tremendously useful in shell scripts. So it is useful when we look at commands in general, but the real power of this comes out when you use shell scripts. So I've been saying that for a few things, just remember there's a lot of things we'll talk about. May not seem that tremendously useful, but they will be soon. Okay, so let's clear this and we'll print out echo. So if you say pwd, just prints out pwd. But if you use the back-tic command, it tells you, basically executes the pwd command. So cd to somewhere else, to my home directory. Okay, so you can use something like this, echo, and you don't have to use protection, but you can. You are currently in pwd, close back-tic, close double quotes. Okay, so you just created a string that says you are currently in, and then it turns out it takes the output of pwd, sticks it right in there. Another example you can do, now this does not seem tremendously useful, like echo pwd, echo back-tic pwd does exactly the same as pwd by itself. So echo back-tic date, actually all it does is exactly what date does. By itself, just using back-tic just for the hell of it, it's not tremendously useful. But they are tremendously useful if you want to, for example, set up a string like the date and time now is date. And this is useful, for example, if you take this and then put that into a file. Okay, you can do that, and then you can say ls-l and append the output of ls-l to file list. Now, if we were to look at file list using the more command to go through pages, I don't know how many pages we will have. We will see this. We will see that the date, so here's the output of file list. The date and time now is Thursday, so on. And then we see the list of files. So this is a handy way to timestamp the list of files and with the current date and time. Okay, so it tells us on this day and at this time here are the files that we have. Okay, so once again, this is command substitution. What you're doing is you're putting in a command and then taking the output of the command, saving that as a string, and you can put that into a file, you can put that into a variable, and you can do all kinds of other processing. And we'll see more of this later. We'll keep using these things. Another special meta character is the semicolon, and this is used to execute commands in sequence. So for example, that same file list, let's say we wanted to have the date and the list of files, you could do something like this: date semicolon ls. So let's try it out, just right on the command line. Date ls. And what this does is execute the date, execute ls. You can say date who am I ls. So this tells us that for this, at this time, for this user, this was a list of files in their home directory. You can actually also say pwd, any number of commands. So for this, at this time, for this user, in this directory, these are the list of files. And you can put in additional strings to basically explain what these different outputs are. Okay. So basically what semicolon does is allow us to enter more than one command on a line. It turns out that you can take the output of all of these commands, and if you try to use just the semicolons and try to print that to a file, it actually doesn't work. So the way to get it to work is to use this grouping command, that is parentheses. Okay, so if you did date semicolon ls, pipe the output to today's files, right? That output of date shows up right in the terminal. The output of ls is redirected to today's files. You can cat, I don't think it'll be that long. Yeah, so there it is. Today's files only contains the list of files. So once again, even though, let's say we wanted to have date and ls outputs go to today's files, only the ls output went to today's files. How do we fix it? You can use parentheses. Okay, and now if you were to cat today's files, there's the date and there's a list of files. You can combine this with echo to print out other strings, like explaining today's date is, here is a list of files currently in a particular directory, and so on. And this is tremendously useful for scripts. Okay, so once again, the parentheses take all of these things as one thing, and they produce one output that all go into this file that we want to create. Okay, so next up is a very important command called grep. What grep does is search for patterns. For now, we will just search for simple strings. It turns out we're not going to use patterns so much right now. We will later on. But that's where its real power shows up, is that rather than just using straight strings, which we will stick to for now, later on we will use grep with patterns. So you can use wildcard characters, stuff like that, things like that, okay? So we can search for patterns in files. So here's a simple example. We say grep and some name and search for all occurrences of Caitlin and report.txt. And it'll show you, I think, the first occurrence, or all of them. So let's take a simple example. Let's create a file, report.txt, and we'll do a bunch of names. Without any. Alright, that's good enough. Do Control D, and now if I list the contents of the file using cat, there it is. Let's say I didn't know what report had, and I grep for JK. There should be a couple of them in this file. There it is. It shows me the two occurrences of the string JK in this file. Once again, this is fairly easy to do. The real power of grep shows up when we use not just strings, but patterns of strings. Okay. A couple of interesting things. Grep is about 40 years old now. The name comes from an ed command, and this was the command g/re/p. This is something, we use something like this in VI, and this stands for Global Regular Expression Print. If you know what regular expressions are, great. If you don't, take a look at this link and read up about irregular expressions. It's very useful for setting up patterns, mainly. There's a bunch of options that you can use with grep. You can use -c just to get a count rather than all of the matches. And so -c will display only the count of the matching lines. Let's try that. Grep -c tells you, it just tells you that you have two places where this pattern matched, the string matched. Sometimes that's important. Sometimes all you want is a count. You can ignore case just like you do with pattern matching in Java. You can use -n. Let's try that one instead of the -c. Tells us on line 2 and line 3 we got matching patterns, matching hits. Okay, and like with anything else, there's the -- or the long form options that Linux has. --help, -- version. This is sometimes useful because the older versions are not as powerful. Definitely 40 years ago they didn't have all of these things. Now grep is a very powerful command. So you can search for a pattern or a string in a number of files. Let's just try this. So we'll copy report.txt to report2 and report3. And now we'll do the same grep, but we say report star. Okay, that star should catch report.txt, report2, and report3. And it tells you the name of the file where it found it. They're all the same. I mean, they have the same contents. In report2, it found it at lines 2 and 3. In report3, it also found it at lines 2 and 3. And also in report.txt, same thing. Okay, so experiment with this. Try this out. This is a very useful command that will help us search for all kinds of things. In addition to searching inside files, it can, for example, search the output of other commands, and we can do this with the pipe operator. So once again, this is the operator, which just looks like a straight line. On some keyboards it appears like two lines with a small space in between, right in the middle, and it's right above, usually it's right above your enter key or your return key if you're using a Mac. Okay, so for example, ls-l gives you that. There's a whole bunch of files called with the text report in it, so we can search for them. Let's say if you have hundreds of files, so we'll just search for repo, and repo matches report2, report3, and report.txt. Okay, so this is extremely useful if you have, let's say, thousands of files and you just want to find a particular file somewhere in there. There are other commands, sure, but this grep allows you to search very quickly for a certain pattern. Okay. Next up, we'll take a look at sort.